Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Selling Sanity podcast. I am your hostess, Theresa Concepcion, Esquire, and on today's episode, we are breaking down Brie. Specifically, it's kind of funny now that I have started this podcast, I have become something of a Selling Sunset tip line. And among the tips that I've been getting in comments or in the DMs is, FYI, did you realize that Bree and Cassandra Dawn from season 7 were escorts? And if you don't remember who Cassandra is, I don't blame you. She was on the show for about 2 seconds, but she was brought in season 7, and she was the one that Bree had the conniption fit over in the season 7 finale when they were at the office party and Bree stormed off set, ripped off her mic, said that she was done with the show. It was a pretty extreme reaction towards someone that we hadn't really seen and didn't really know anything about. And so I was curious about it. And the information that I got was that it's the tea that I am behind on that Bree was an escort with Cassandra, and apparently Bree thought that, Cassandra being on the show was going to, reveal that part. Now, listen, I'm not here to shame women for doing what they got to do. But what I did find interesting was that someone else told me that one of the women on Selling OC admitted to being on an escort, and that I guess several people on the Selling OC cast were kind of scandalized by the fact that this person was on an escort app. To which I replied, wait, there are escort apps? I mean, call me antiquated or old fashioned or just, out of the loop. But when I think of an escort, I kind of think of a woman dressed up sitting at a fancy bar by herself waiting, or I think of like Pretty Woman and, the women walking up to the cars. I just didn't have it in my mind's eye that there was such a thing as apps for escorts because as an attorney, I'm very, very risk averse. And I will put this out there as a PSA side note. Okay. One of the things that I always tell people is keep your mouth shut because you incriminate yourself more the more you try to explain. So if you're ever in a situation where you're being detained, by a police officer, you only ever want to give your name and you say, I would like an attorney. They say you have the right to remain silent for a reason. It's a right that you should exercise. And they have to tell you that because it's against human nature to stay quiet when you're stressed. It's against human nature to stay quiet when you are afraid. But the best thing that you can do in those situations is stay quiet and ask for a lawyer. Why do I say that? Even if you quote unquote haven't done anything wrong, the police don't know that you haven't done anything wrong. And there is such a thing as, police getting the wrong person. You always want to make sure that you have a lawyer who is objective, calm, and can help you navigate any legal situation. If you were ever in the back of a police car, keep your mouth shut. Most police cars nowadays have recording devices, and anything you say in the police car can and will be used against you in a court of law. If you were ever in a holding cell with other people, don't talk to anyone because number one, it's legal for the police to have a, informant in there and say, if you get this person to say something, then we can drop the charges against you. It's also legal for a police officer to pretend to be an inmate just to get you to talk. It's also legal for the police to lie to you. It's legal for them to say, hey, so and so is next door and they're signing a confession as we speak, naming you the person who did A, B, and C. And it's going to look really bad for you if you don't beat them to the punch. Or, it's going to make you look guilty if you make me like get you a lawyer. You might as well talk to me now while we can still work it out. Anything like that, The only thing that you are allowed to say is your name and I want a lawyer. That's it. And then wait. Also, don't take anything handed to you. If a police officer hands you a mug and you have not been fingerprinted, don't accept the mug because once you touch it, they can take it back and fingerprint it. So keep your hands to yourself, keep your mouth shut, and ask for a lawyer. That's the end of this PSA portion of this podcast. But again, the reason I say that is because that's how my mind works in terms of, protecting yourself. And so it completely blows my mind that there are apps that people are using to intentionally create a digital trail of them breaking the law. So that kind of blew my mind. I'm like, wait a minute. I had to Google it because I'm not admitted in California. I was like, is prostitution legal in California now that people are just using escort apps? And no, it is not. And so, yeah, there's got to be easier ways to get laid. I mean, do you pay with an Amex? Is the digital home market like on credit now? Like, what is happening, right? So I was very surprised by the existence of escort apps. Um, I don't know if Tiesi was ever on a specific escort app, but it does seem because I did then reach out to one of my sources from behind the scenes of Selling Sunset. And the only thing that that person could say is, yes, I too have heard that Bree was an escort. So all of this is hearsay, but if you're interested in why, Bree had the meltdown that she did in season 7, it appears to be the case that Cassandra and Bree were escorts together. Bree was trying to play it off like she had never seen her before, didn't know her, and then ultimately freaked out because she didn't want that part of her life aired on camera. So that's part one of the Bree breakdown. The other part of the Bree breakdown is the lawsuit that has been filed against her by former employees, including her former nanny, who alleges that Bree called her an ADHD idiot and a short bus riding bitch. For those who don't know, a short bus is the kind of bus that's typically used to transport people with disabilities who can't drive. Why is this a thing? California is a really unique state. And I will explain the law by describing, since we're talking about, selling sunset and real estate, I'm going to describe it like building a house, right? The federal law is your foundation. In federal law that protects people in all 50 states, if you are an employee working for an employer who has more than 50 people, then you are protected from discrimination against you from that employer by, reasons of, disability. They can't make fun of you for ADHD. If you're pregnant, they can't, stop giving you good opportunities because you're pregnant. If you're a person of color, they're not supposed to make racist or derogatory comments towards you. If you're LGBTQ plus, you're not supposed to be, subject to any kind of discrimination based on your sexuality. In federal law, when an employer has 50 or more people, these are the protections that are afforded US citizens in all 50 states. Okay, that's the floor. States can always give you more protection than the federal government, but they can never give you less. So that's why I say federal law is the floor. Now, some states just decide you only need the floor. And so they'll recreate a state law, but basically it's the same exact thing as the federal law. So if you're an employer and you have 49 people working for you, you may not be, liable for any workplace discrimination because you don't meet that criteria. California is different. California doesn't stick with the foundation. California built a freaking skyscraper. And so California is much more protective of employees than the federal government. Because in California, you only need to have one employee for you to be subject to the anti-discrimination laws. So Bree Tiesi had 3 employees, and those 3 are suing. And this is actually why in LA you read a lot about former nannies, chauffeurs, security guards, suing their celebrity employers because of this provision where legally you only have to be an employer of one person for you to be subject to anti-discrimination. So that's why, because I've seen comments from people saying things like, I don't understand, if she called her a name, I can't believe you can sue for that. She can be sued, Bree can be sued, because as an employer, she is supposed to create a safe working environment. And what she created by making fun of people based on their disability, cursing them out, making physical threats, she created what's called a hostile work environment. And once you do that, you open yourself up to legal liability. So, where is this case now? It was filed in April of last year. And that just goes to show how slow litigation is, because a year and a half later, and they're still just in the discovery phase. And discovery takes a really long time. Well, why is that? So this nanny is suing Bree. The nanny now gets to prove her case by asking Bree for all kinds of information. She can ask Bree for all of her screenshots on text messages from, this year to, year A to year B, for anything that references the nanny or any other employee. So let's say Bree sent Emma a text and said, "Oh my God, my nanny is such an ADHD idiot." The nanny is legally entitled to see that text. If Bree emailed Chriselle and said, "Hey, I'm going to be running late because my short bus riding bitch of a nanny isn't going to be here on time," the nanny is entitled to see that email as well. So discovery takes a long time because, number one, the other party has to go and collect all this information. Number two, just because they collect the information doesn't mean that they have to make it easy for you to find. So, to explain it visually, if you're trying a case and you really only need 5 pieces of paper that are going to prove your case and why you should win, the other side is legally obligated to give you those 5 pieces of paper, but they are not legally obligated to make those pieces of paper easy to find. So instead of 5 pieces of paper, you get 5 million pieces of paper. You get conference rooms full of boxes. I was once in a conference room where the boxes were floor to ceiling on all 4 walls, and there was a tiny desk just for me in the middle. Or the data is in digital form, and then you're clicking documents all day long because you just need those 5 pieces of paper, but you have to spend months, and your client has to spend hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, to pay for your time so that you could find those 5 pieces of paper. And this is why the majority of cases in civil court don't go to trial, just because of how expensive it is to pay for someone to look for those 5 pieces of paper. Discovery is the most expensive part of any litigation. Now, let's say the nanny found the text messages to Emma and found the email to Chriselle. Well, now those 2 people would be potential witnesses in the case for the nanny, because the nanny has the right to question them and say and ask in a deposition, "Hey, were you ever present when you know Bree was making fun of me? Did you ever witness this? Did you ever hear about it secondhand? Did you ever participate in anything? Look at this text message where you said LOL when she called me an ADHD bitch. Did you think that was funny?" So then they get to depose witnesses. Okay. Here's the other thing, too. The employees might actually have subpoenaed, I don't know this, but I would imagine that they've subpoenaed the production company because, the cameramen and all those people are setting up at people's, homes around their kids when they have their staff there. So it's possible that some production, folks behind the scenes witnessed Bree's treatment of her staff. It's possible that there's some footage somewhere, that cameras were rolling and filming and caught Bree in the background, being abusive to some of her employees. So that would force the production team and the production company to hire lawyers to say, hey, we need you to we need you to help us go through all this footage and figure out if there's anything in there that this nanny and these other employees would be entitled to in their lawsuit against Bree. So a lawsuit is never just about, one person versus one person. It's about one person versus everyone who might be a potential witness, everyone who might have information. And you have to find all those people, you have to subpoena all those people, you have to gather all the information, and then you get to question them in depositions. It takes a really, really long time. So, based on where we are procedurally with Bree's case, I would imagine that by this time next year, next November, they'll be done with discovery. And then one of two things can happen. Okay. Once they have all of this evidence against Bree and they see how bad it is, they can settle. And at which point Nick Cannon would probably step in, I would guess, and pay them off. But I personally, if they have a good case and they find a lot of good information, I would never settle this case and I would take it to trial, because once you put all that information in the public sphere and it's publicly available, that overrides any kind of NDA that the employees signed while they were working for Bree. And it doesn't preclude them from talking about it in the future. So if they wanted to monetize this by, making a what it was like to work for Bree podcast, they can all do that now and spill all the behind the scenes tea once the lawsuit, has gone through its course. They could write books. They could do all these things. And if you settle a case, typically one of the conditions of settlement is that it's another kind of an NDA. You agree that you'll never talk about this person again, or that you won't share any of the details, et cetera, in exchange for this money. But if the employees have the upper hand, in my mind, there's no reason, unless they can't afford to financially, and that's another reason why cases settle, just because of the length of time that it takes, litigation does get very expensive. But if they can hang in there, then a trial would be, I would guess, early 2027. So by April 27, 3 years after they first filed their complaint in April 2024, if they can hang in there until about April 2027, they should have won against Bree at trial. Now, why do I say they're going to win? Because in a civil case, you only have to prove whether or not something is 51% likely to be true. That's why I use O.J. Simpson as a good example, because when he was charged with murder, his literal physical freedom was at risk. And so when it's your freedom at risk, the burden of proof is much higher. The burden of proof is beyond any reasonable doubt. And the prosecution couldn't meet that burden. But when he got sued for wrongful death, the families won against O.J. Simpson because they only had to prove it was 51% likely that he committed those murders. And so they won in civil court. So based on everything that we know about Bree, including her, end of season 7 meltdown over her former escort colleague, Cassandra, and whatever information that they gather through their discovery process, if they have a really strong case where they, Bree's called people other names, or, has been seen engaging in abusive behavior towards others, there's absolutely going to be a verdict finding that there was a 51% chance that Bree did what they accused her of doing. So, in addition to getting whatever verdict, the jury will award, then those people will never be, precluded from speaking out about their experiences because all that was in the public realm. And now they can do tell alls and all that stuff. So, that's what I would recommend if I was their attorney. I don't know who their lawyers are. I haven't looked into the case that closely. I'm admitted in 5 jurisdictions. California is not one of them. But that's the tea on Bree. She's getting sued. She's getting sued in California under California labor and employment laws because California has way, way, way more protections for employees than the federal government does. So they couldn't sue her in federal court, but they can definitely sue her in state court for abusive behavior. Um, yeah, so that's the tea on Bree. Lawsuit pending, escort allegations floating, and there are escort apps, which I still can't believe. Please don't get on an escort app or any kind of app that requires, breaking the law. Break the law the old fashioned way. Gonna break the law. Make it harder. Don't make a digital trail of breaking the law, please. I beg you. All right, guys, that was today's episode of Selling Sanity. New episodes drop every Wednesday. And thank you again for all of your support. This has been such a fun